Have you ever wondered why, throughout his journey of salvation, Jesus rarely chose the easiest or shortest path? He crossed the windswept Sea of Galilee just to encounter a madman living among the tombs. He chose to travel through Samaria, a region rife with 700 years of ethnic animosity, simply to wait by a well at high noon for a woman. To the world, these were inconvenient and peculiar detours, yet to him, they represented a divine necessity, ADI. Today, we will uncover a truth that touches the deepest recesses of the soul. Why did Jesus always choose the longest, most arduous path, solely to reclaim a single lost soul?
There is a moment in the Gospel of Mark where Jesus gets into a boat, not to cross to a town that has been waiting for him, not to reach the next synagogue on his ministry route, not to fulfill an appointment with a crowd that has gathered expecting him. He gets into a boat with his disciples and sails across the Sea of Galilee, which in a first-century fishing vessel in unpredictable water is not a casual undertaking. And the reason he goes is not a city or a synagogue or a crowd. It is one man living in the tombs outside a Gentile city, so violent that no chain could hold him, crying out day and night, cutting himself on the stones. The town had tried everything and given up. Nobody was going to that man anymore. Nobody except Jesus, who got in a boat and sailed across a sea to reach him. We will get there, but first, why? Why the long way? Why in a ministry that is always moving, always pressing forward, always with Jerusalem somewhere on the horizon? Why does Jesus consistently choose the route that takes him through the places nobody else goes, toward the people nobody else is going to? Why does he cross ethnic barriers that have calcified over 7 centuries, sail across bodies of water nobody asked him to cross, stop in cities he is only passing through, detour into territory his own disciples find deeply uncomfortable? Because he cannot see someone who is lost without going toward them. That is not a strategy. It is not a ministry philosophy he arrived at through careful reflection. It is his nature. And once you see it, once you trace the pattern across all 4 Gospels, from the woman at the well, to the man in the tombs, to the short man in the sycamore tree, you will not be able to read the Gospels the same way again. This is the story of why Jesus always takes the long way, and who he takes it for. There are 3 routes from Galilee to Jerusalem. Every first-century Jewish traveler knew them. The western route follows the Mediterranean coast. The eastern route crosses the Jordan, goes south through Perea, and crosses back near Jericho, safer than the alternative, because Perea had Jewish communities, and a Jewish traveler could expect hospitality. It added days to the journey, but it was predictable, and it was respectable. And then there was the route through Samaria, straight south, direct, geographically the most efficient path between Galilee and Jerusalem, and socially, religiously, historically, the most impossible. Jews and Samaritans had not spoken civilly in 700 years. The split went back to the Assyrian conquest, to intermarriage, to competing temples on competing mountains, and the kind of ethnic contempt that has no bottom. The Mishnah records specific purity laws regarding contact with Samaritans. Josephus records outbreaks of violence between Jewish pilgrims and Samaritan villages along that road. A Jewish man traveling through Samaria alone was not simply making a geographic choice. He was making a statement, which is why the sentence in John chapter 4 is so remarkable. Now he had to go through Samaria. The Greek word is midday. It appears throughout the Gospel of John at moments of divine necessity. The Son of Man must be lifted up. It is necessary that he suffer. He had to go through Samaria. It is not the language of preference or convenience. It is the language of compulsion. Something required this. Something made the Samaritan route not optional, but necessary. Not the geography. The geography made it optional. What made it necessary was a woman at a well at noon who did not yet know that the answer to the question she had been asking her whole life was sitting at Jacob's well, waiting for her. She comes at noon. Women came to the well in the morning, when the air was cool and the social life of the village gathered there. A woman who comes at noon has already decided that the morning crowd costs more than the midday heat. She has 5 ex-husbands and is living with a man who is not her husband, and she has learned to avoid the places where people look at her the way people look at a woman with that history. She arrives and a Jewish man is sitting at the well, and he speaks to her. And what follows is the longest recorded conversation between Jesus and any individual in all four Gospels. He tells her about living water. She asks about worship. He tells her everything she has ever done, not as an accusation, but as evidence that he already knows her completely and has come to her anyway. She leaves her water jar and runs back to the city. The whole town comes out. 2 days of teaching follow. 2 days. He stayed in Samaria for 2 days, among people his culture had spent 700 years avoiding, because the midday, the divine necessity, was not resolved in one conversation at a well. It stretched across 2 days of teaching and eating and being present in a place where no respectable Jewish teacher went. Here's what most people miss about that word, midday. He did not have to go through Samaria. Nobody was making him. He could have taken the eastern route like everyone else, added a few days, arrived in Jerusalem without causing a single raised eyebrow. The necessity was not imposed on him from outside. It came from inside. It came from the nature of a God who, when he sees someone lost, cannot not go toward them. Pay attention to this, because Jesus himself explains it. In Luke 15, the Pharisees are watching him eat with tax collectors and sinners, and they begin to grumble. Luke uses a word for their grumbling that implies not a single complaint, but a continuous, persistent, ongoing murmuring. They cannot stop talking about how wrong this is. And Jesus answers them not with a theological argument, but with 3 stories, told in sequence, each making the same point with more intensity than the one before. A shepherd has 100 sheep. One goes missing. He leaves the 99 and goes after the one, and he searches until he finds it. Not until it is convenient, not until the terrain becomes too difficult, until he finds it. Then he carries it home on his shoulders and calls his neighbors to celebrate. A woman has 10 coins. She loses one. She lights a lamp and sweeps the whole house and searches carefully until she finds it. She does not wait for the coin to turn up. She searches the whole house until... And then the third story, the one that escalates everything. A son takes his inheritance, leaves home, wastes everything in a foreign country, ends up feeding pigs in a field and envying what the pigs are eating. He decides to go home and beg to be made a servant. He rehearses his speech on the road, and while he is still a long way off, Luke uses a phrase that implies the father has been watching the road, that there has been a regularity to this watching, a habit of scanning the horizon every day since the boy left. The father sees him and runs. The Greek word for what moves in the father when he sees the son is splagnizomai. It means bowels, visceral organs, the deepest, most physical seat of human emotion. Not a mild feeling, not a gentle warmth, a gut response that moves the body before the mind decides. He is filled with it, and he runs. He runs before the son can finish his speech. He runs before the son has made any restitution or shown any proof of changed behavior. He runs while the son is still a long way off, which means the son watches his father running toward him across a distance and knows before a single word is spoken that the speech he rehearsed is not going to be necessary. Now watch the pattern across all 3 stories. The sheep does not find its way home. The shepherd goes. The coin does not roll out from under the furniture on its own. The woman searches. The son is still a long way off when the father starts running. In every story, the lost thing does not initiate. The seeker does, every time. Jesus is not describing a theological principle. He is describing himself. He is showing the Pharisees, who have been grumbling about his choice of dinner companions, what it looks like when a God who cannot see someone lost without going toward them sits down at a table with the people he has come all this way to find. The midday of Samaria is not an isolated decision. It is the character of the God who makes it. And the character, it turns out, does not have a limit on how far it will go. Now we come to the boat. The same day Jesus has been teaching crowds from a boat on the Galilean shore, he turns to his disciples as the evening comes and says something that must have surprised them. Let us go over to the other side. The other side of the Sea of Galilee is not a place Jewish teachers go. The Eastern Shore, the Decapolis, the region of 10 Gentile cities, is not on anyone's ministry itinerary. There are no synagogues waiting, no crowds who have heard about him and gathered in expectation, no religious infrastructure of any kind. The Decapolis is Gentile territory, Roman territory, the kind of place that a first-century Jewish rabbi would not have reason to visit even once in the course of a lifetime. They get in the boat. A violent storm comes up. Mark describes it with the kind of detail that suggests Peter's eyewitness account behind the narrative, the waves breaking over the boat already swamping. Jesus is asleep in the stern on a cushion. They wake him. He rebukes the wind and the waves, and there is a great calm. And the disciples look at each other and say, "Who is this man, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" They land on the other side. And the moment they step out of the boat, a man comes out of the tombs to meet them. Mark paints this scene with an intensity that is almost cinematic. This man lives among the dead, in the burial caves cut into the limestone hills above the lake. He has been there a long time. The people of the town have tried to restrain him, chains and shackles, the text says, and he has torn them apart every time because no one was strong enough to subdue him. Day and night, he cries out among the tombs. Day and night, he cuts himself with stones. This is what he is. This is what the Decapolis has given up on. This is the man the town has collectively decided is beyond reach, beyond help, beyond the category of people for whom solutions exist. They have done what people do when someone's lostness becomes inconvenient. They have tried to manage him, failed, and then left him to the tombs. Jesus sailed across a sea to reach him. When the man sees Jesus from a distance, he runs to him. Mark records this detail, and it is easy to miss. He runs, not away, toward. Something in this broken, violent, chained and unchained man, who has not been in his right mind for years, recognizes something in the one stepping off the boat, and he runs toward it. He falls on his knees before Jesus. The demons speak. Their name is Legion, a Roman military term, thousands, and they beg not to be sent out of the region. A large herd of pigs is feeding on the hillside nearby. The demons ask to be sent into them. Jesus permits it. The pigs rush down the steep bank and drown in the lake. The townspeople come out to see what has happened, and they find the man who lived in the tomb sitting, clothed, in his right mind. 3 words that arrive in sequence, as if checking items off a list. Sitting, no longer running, no longer violent, no longer crying out day and night. Clothed. Mark earlier noted the man wore no clothes, another marker of his separation from the human community. In his right mind. The Greek is sophroneo, to be of sound mind, to think clearly, to be restored to the full functioning of reason and self-possession. The town is afraid, and they ask Jesus to leave. He leaves. He respects the request. The man who has been delivered begs to come with him. Jesus does not let him. Go home to your own people. Tell him how much the Lord has done for you and how he has had mercy on you. The man goes. He goes through the Decapolis, all 10 cities, and tells everyone what Jesus has done. And here is what that single act of going produces. When Jesus returns to the Decapolis region later, a crowd of 4,000 people is waiting for him. Not the Jewish crowd he usually teaches, 4,000 Gentiles, many of whom almost certainly heard the story from the man who used to live in the tombs. Pay attention to the arithmetic of the detour. Jesus crossed a sea for one man. The one man told the 10 cities. The 10 cities produced 4,000 waiting on a hillside for a miracle. The disciples who got in the boat reluctantly and rode through a storm and stepped onto foreign soil are now feeding 4,000 people who would never have heard the name of Jesus if Jesus had decided the eastern shore of Galilee was outside his ministry territory. He always knows something about the long way that the disciples cannot yet see. And this is where it gets remarkable. Because the Gadarene country is not the furthest Jesus will go for one person. There is a moment in the Gospels where Jesus travels to the region of Tyre and Sidon, northwest of Galilee, on the Mediterranean coast, Gentile territory, further from Jerusalem than anywhere else Jesus goes in the entire gospel accounts. He goes there to withdraw, to find a house and be quiet. But even there, even at the furthest point from Jerusalem, someone finds him, a woman. Matthew calls her a Canaanite, the ancient term, the word dripping with centuries of conflict and displacement, and the kind of historical enmity that does not soften with time. She has no claim on a Jewish Messiah. She knows it. She comes anyway. "Lord, Son of David, have mercy on me. My daughter is demon-possessed and suffering terribly." The disciples want to send her away. She is making noise. She is persistent. She is inconvenient. And Jesus says something that sounds, on the surface, like a refusal. "I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel." She falls at his feet. "Lord, help me." It is not right to take the children's bread and toss it to the dogs. And here, in this moment, which has troubled readers for centuries, she says the thing that unlocks everything. Even the dogs eat the crumbs that fall from their master's table. She is not arguing that she deserves the bread. She is not claiming a right she does not have. She is saying, "I am asking for what falls. I believe the overflow of what you already have is enough for what my daughter needs." Jesus stops. "Woman, you have great faith. Your request is granted." Her daughter is healed at that moment. Stay with me, because this scene carries something the Gadarene crossing does not. In the Gadarene, Jesus crosses to a man who cannot ask for help. Here, Jesus tests a woman who can articulate her need, tests her persistence, her humility, her willingness to stay in the conversation even when it seems to be closing against her. And what he finds is faith he himself calls great. He traveled to the furthest point from Jerusalem in his entire earthly ministry, for one mother, for one daughter who was not there. Now watch the pattern that has been forming across these two scenes. The Gadarene man could not come to Jesus. He was chained, spiritually and physically, to a place no one visited. Jesus sailed across the sea to reach him where he was. The Canaanite woman came to Jesus. She crossed every barrier to get to him. And Jesus tested that crossing rather than shortcutting it, because the crossing itself was the thing that revealed what was in her. Two different people, two different conditions, two different kinds of lostness. And in both cases, whether the lost person cannot come or comes with everything they have, Jesus is already further along the road toward them than anyone expected him to be. The distance he travels is never accidental. It is always exactly as far as the lost person is from home. But there is one more journey, the most significant one, the one that takes place not in a boat or on the coast road, but on the road to Jerusalem, the road Jesus knows leads to the cross. And on that road, heading toward his own death, he still stops. Twice. He is on his way to Jerusalem. Every step he takes from this point forward is a step toward the cross, and he knows it. He has told his disciples 3 times, 3 separate, explicit predictions, that what waits for him in Jerusalem is arrest, mockery, flogging, and death. The disciples do not understand it, but Jesus understands it. He has been walking toward this for 3 years with the kind of clarity that belongs to someone who has chosen the road rather than stumbled onto it. And he walks through Jericho. The first stop happens before he even enters the city. A blind man is sitting at the approach to Jericho, on the road outside the gates, where beggars sat because the movement of pilgrims through the city meant a steady flow of potential alms. Mark names him, which is unusual in the gospel accounts and significant. His name is Bartimaeus, Bar-Timaeus, son of Timaeus, a man specific enough to have a name, specific enough that Mark's original audience apparently knew who he was. Bartimaeus hears that Jesus of Nazareth is passing by, and he begins to shout, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." The crowd tells him to be quiet, more than once. This is a procession, pilgrims heading to Jerusalem for Passover, the momentum of a significant moment, and a blind beggar on the roadside disrupting the flow with his shouting. The people around him tell him what crowds always tell the inconvenient. Be quiet. You are not the point of this. There are more important things happening. He shouts louder, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus stops. Not the crowd, Jesus. He stops the entire procession for one blind man on the side of a road. He calls for him. The crowd, having just been telling Bartimaeus to be quiet, now turns and says, Cheer up, on your feet. He is calling you. Bartimaeus throws off his cloak, his only possession of value, his sleeping mat and his collection vessel, and his only protection against the cold, throws it off and comes to Jesus. What do you want me to do for you? Of all the questions Jesus could ask a blind man standing in front of him, this is the most deliberate. He knows. He always knows. But he asks, because the asking calls out of Bartimaeus what Bartimaeus needs to say out loud. You have to name your need before you can receive what is offered. Rabbi, I want to see. Go, your faith has healed you. Immediately he receives his sight and follows Jesus on the road. On the road to Jerusalem, on the road to the cross. Bartimaeus, who minutes ago was sitting blind on the roadside, is now walking the same road as the one who gave him sight. Jesus stopped on the way to his own death to give a blind man his sight, and then he enters Jericho. What happens in Jericho is not a roadside encounter. It is a deliberate stop in the city itself. And the person Jesus stops for is not someone who, by any measure, deserves the stop. His name is Zacchaeus. He is the chief tax collector of Jericho. Chief, not just a tax collector, but the one who runs the system, the one who oversees the extraction of Roman taxes from a Jewish population that despises both the tax and the man who collects it. Jericho is a wealthy city. It sits at the center of a lucrative balsam trade, and Zacchaeus controls the tax flow. He has become rich doing so, which means he has become rich at the expense of his own people. He is a collaborator, a traitor, the kind of person a crowd instinctively moves away from rather than toward. He has heard that Jesus is passing through. He is short. Luke records this with almost comic specificity, the kind of detail an eyewitness remembers. And the crowd is thick, and he cannot see over it. So he does something that a man of his position and wealth should find deeply undignified. He runs ahead of the crowd and climbs a sycamore tree, a wide, spreading tree with low branches, the kind of tree that a man who needs height and has no other options will use without caring what it looks like. Zacchaeus is up in the tree when Jesus walks underneath it, and Jesus stops, looks up, and says something that nobody in the crowd expects. Zacchaeus, come down immediately. I must stay at your house today. The same word from John chapter 4, must, today. The crowd is scandalized. He has gone to be the guest of a sinner. The logic of the crowd is impeccable by every social and religious standard of the day. You do not eat in the house of a collaborator. You do not honor a traitor with your presence. You certainly do not stop on the road to Jerusalem to have dinner in the home of the most hated man in Jericho. Jesus goes anyway, and something happens at that table. Luke does not describe the conversation, but whatever it was, it produces this. Zacchaeus stands up. Look, Lord, here and now I give half of my possessions to the poor, and if I have cheated anybody out of anything, I will pay back 4 times the amount. Half of everything. 4 times the amount of any fraud. This is not a minor adjustment to his lifestyle. This is the dismantling of the financial structure of his life, offered voluntarily, standing at a table in his own house, to the one who came to his tree uninvited and named him by name. And Jesus says, today salvation has come to this house, because this man too is a son of Abraham. Son of Abraham, not a traitor, not a collaborator, not the most hated man in Jericho, a son of Abraham. The identity that Zacchaeus' choices had buried under decades of compromise, the belonging he had traded away for Roman coins, Jesus hands it back to him at dinner on the road to the cross. And then Jesus says something that names the whole pattern of everything we have traced from the Samaritan road to the Gadarene shore, to the coast at Tyre, and now to a sycamore tree in Jericho. For the Son of Man came to seek and to save the lost. That is the sentence. That is the explanation Jesus himself offers for why he stopped at a tree in Jericho on the way to Jerusalem to die. Not a theological treatise, not a lengthy defense. One sentence. He came to seek and to save the lost. The verb came first, seek, before save, because you cannot save what you have not found, and you cannot find what you have not gone toward, and you cannot go toward what you have not seen. And Jesus sees the lost the way a shepherd sees one missing sheep against a hillside of 99, the way a woman sees a gap in her 10 coins, The way a father sees a figure still a long way off on the horizon, clearly, specifically, as if that one were the only one. Now the pattern completes. He had to go through Samaria because a woman at a well at noon was not going to find her way to him. He crossed the Sea of Galilee because a man in the tombs was not going to find his way to anyone. He traveled to the furthest point from Jerusalem in his entire ministry because a mother was not going to stop asking until someone answered. He stopped outside Jericho for a blind man the crowd was silencing, and inside Jericho for a tax collector perched in a tree in a last-ditch attempt to see something he could not name. And all of it, every detour, every sea crossing, every road through forbidden territory, every stop in a city he was only passing through, all of it is the visible edge of something so much larger that it barely fits inside the gospel accounts. Because the cross itself is the longest detour in the history of the universe. Stay with me. He left heaven. The writer of Philippians says he did not consider equality with God something to be grasped. He let it go, emptied himself, took on the nature of a servant, was made in human likeness. He took on flesh in a barn in Bethlehem and grew up in a carpenter's house in Nazareth and walked the roads of Galilee and Judea for 33 years. He went through Samaria and across the Sea of Galilee and up the coast to Tyre and Sidon and through Jericho on his way to Jerusalem. And in Jerusalem, on a cross, outside the city walls, he absorbed the full cost of every kind of lostness that every person who has ever lived has ever accumulated. That is not a short way. That is not the efficient route. That is God taking the longest possible road from heaven to earth to a hill outside Jerusalem, because the lost could not find their way home on their own. And the only one who could go get them decided that the distance was worth it. Every detour in the Gospels is a small version of this. Every sea crossing and every road through Samaria and every tree in Jericho is a sentence in the paragraph that the cross writes in full. He always takes the long way because the long way is the only way that ends where the lost person actually is. Augustine, at the end of his long wandering, wrote something that has never been improved on. He had spent decades running, through philosophy, through pleasure, through ambition, and at the end of all of it, he wrote, "You were with me, but I was not with you." Not that God had been absent during the wandering, that God had been present at every point along every wrong road, already there before Augustine arrived. That is the God of the Gospels, the one who does not wait at the destination for the lost to find their way, the one who is already further down the road toward you than you know. There are three things I want you to carry out of this. The first is this: he always initiates. The lost sheep does not find the shepherd goes. The lost coin does not roll out from under the furniture. The woman searches the whole house. The prodigal son is still a long way off when the father starts running. If you have been waiting to be ready enough, clean enough, close enough before approaching him, you have misunderstood the direction of the movement. He is already moving toward you. He has been moving toward you since before you knew you were lost. The second is this: the distance he travels is always exactly as far as necessary. Not one step more, never one step less. A conversation across 700 years of ethnic hatred for one woman. A sea crossing for one man in the tombs. The furthest point from Jerusalem for one mother. A stop in a tree in Jericho for one tax collector on the road to the cross. The distance is not determined by the difficulty. It is determined by where the lost person actually is. And wherever you are, however far from anything that looks like home, is not further than he has already gone for someone. The third, and this is the one I want you to sit with: the road he is on right now leads to you. Not eventually, not once you get yourself together, not once you have made the right moves or found the right words or walked far enough back toward him to make the reunion feel earned. Already. He is already on the road toward you the way the Father was already running when the Son was still a long way off. The midday, the divine necessity, The compulsion that took him through Samaria and across the sea and up the coast and through Jericho has not been suspended. It has never been suspended. It is his nature, and his nature does not change. He came to seek and to save the lost, which is the only category of person he has ever gone looking for, which means it is the only category you need to be in for him to already be on his way. If this video meant something to you, leave a comment below with the words, "He came for me." Just that. And if you know someone who believes they are too lost to be found, someone who has decided that the distance between where they are and where they would need to be is simply too far, share this with them. Because the man who crossed a sea for one person living in a tomb has not changed his policy since. He still takes the long way. He still stops. He still looks up into whatever tree you have climbed to try to get a glimpse of something you cannot name. And he still knows your name before you say it. We will see you in the next one.